Hello and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. Excited to have AJ Asgary here with us today, founder and CEO of Drugstore2Door out of Oklahoma. AJ, thanks for joining.
Hey, glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
And have been fascinated by your career path, your upgoing, different pivots you've had to the creation of Drugstore2Door. Thought we could kick things off with your story.
Yeah, you bet. How far back do we want to go is the real question, right? Um, so I'll give a quick overview kind of life to where I am today. So grew up in Norman, Oklahoma. The story always tells I grew up as a little fat kid, so I got to kind of experience the bullying and the man, I hate where I'm at, and that whole process of being a young little chunky kid. And I carried that with me till I was about 15 years old. And I was so hungry not to be that little fat kid, And at 15, I had some family friends came in and they were wanting to do some fitness thing. I'm like, sign me up. I'll do it. I'll do it. So from like 15 to 16, I dropped 50 or 60 pounds, somewhere in that range over the course of the summer. I bring that up because it was pivotal kind of in my mindset shift as I continued on. High school, got into competitive bodybuilding, did a bunch of other different stuff. Grew up in a family where my dad came from overseas. My mom's an Okie, whatever hybrid mix that makes me. But, you know, grew up in a family where I watched my dad get up, go to work for himself, morning till night, day in, day out. So I had a lot of this great kind of background bring up, fat kid to getting in control, to realizing I could actually get in control of some things. And I got a flavor for that. And then watching my dad, kind of build his own thing, but build it at a small scale. And I got a flavor for that and a flavor for what working hard looks like. And so that was really my upbringing. My dad was great. Like he had us convinced we were poor. Like he had that nailed, and my mom couldn't budget a penny to save her life. And so in my household, my dad, I always joke about being half brown. My dad, we had three options growing up. Like you be a doctor, a doctor, or a doctor. And it's really up to you. You just choose what option fits you best. And so those were my choices. So naturally, I ended up going to college, went down the MD route, then pivoted over to dentistry. Then from dentistry, I ended up meeting some dude who was in pharmacy, and he convinced me, that's a whole nother story, probably a whole nother podcast, but he convinced me, dude, just go to pharmacy school. You got to go to pharmacy school. I literally went from the dental exam to the pharmacy exam, got into pharmacy school, not even knowing what in the world was going on, and got into the space. And I'll tell you, at the time, I'm a 18-year-old kid, highly influenced. This guy takes me to one of his locations and he's like, look, what do you think I'm doing in revenue at this location? I'm like, no idea. He's like, $6 million. I'm like, I'm pretty sure we just passed horses on the way out here. Like, how is this thing in the middle of nowhere doing 6 million in revenue? It was a younger guy. And he's like, well, and I got six more of them and they all perform similarly. So if you go to school, I'll pay you X as soon as you get out, just go to pharmacy school. So I'm like, yes, and I head in, I go. Long story on that guy, he ended up getting busted for some fraudulent stuff. So luckily I learned nothing from him. Other than it just took me down this particular career path. So I did a bunch of little things in between, all your typical stuff, man, from mowing lawns to, everything you would possibly do in between. But getting into pharmacy school, coming out, my objective was to buy stores. That's why I went to pharmacy school. I wanted to own pharmacies. I went in, I tried to buy one while I was in pharmacy school, didn't go through, thank God. And then ended up working for CVS for 1 year. And during that time, I bought my first pharmacy location. And so I think I was in my early 20s at the time when I graduated. And I bought that first pharmacy location. It's another thing I bring up is I bought that first pharmacy location with my mouth. I was $150,000 in student loan debt when I bought that first pharmacy. And it was very much like a go prove it, And so I was working at CVS 14-hour days. And my day off, I would drive 2 hours to this pharmacy to prove to this owner, like, hey, I'm the dude, give me a chance here. And got him to make me a equity deal based on growth that I brought to that pharmacy, and ended up getting into my first piece of ownership like that. Fast forward, ended up buying multiple locations over time. got into real estate, a bunch of other stuff. And over the ownership course of owning these independent pharmacies, started to see some pain points, things that we're missing, where we're lacking, from a technology standpoint. And that was the brainchild of Drugstore2Door. We got in, and like any great company, you should start right in the middle of COVID. So we launched right during COVID, which was great and terrible, all in one. But we learned a lot, and here we are today with a company that serves our focus market is independent pharmacy. I know it intimately, and we built technology for that particular market. So there's the whole life story in a few minutes.
I was gonna say, I think we did the whole podcast right there. It's covered. That was so much to unpack. I love it, and the fact that you started at childhood. Some of the best episodes we've had actually started around bullying, childhood. You talked about being overweight. I know with everything you've done in fitness, that was obviously a motivator. Probably why pharma, resonated with you as well too, and some of the health aspects. I mean,
Yep.
that's a feat in its own to lose 50 to 60 pounds when you're 15, 16 years old, to then go down the path to become a doctor, choosing dentistry. And then that sounds like a pretty influential conversation that moved you from dentistry to pharma, and then hearing the number breakdowns. And I've heard that in quite a bit of stories, even with my father, and hearing how people chose to go down a route that they were not planning for, but hearing a bit of the numbers, hearing $6 million for a pharmacy, there's six of them. Any fraudulent stories aside, I don't know how those intertangle, but that definitely gets the light bulb going for you. You see the potential, you see
Right.
the value that's happening in that space, and in those markets. As you mentioned, you're driving through farms to get there. I
Mm.
love the ambition on how you're looking to buy a pharmacy while you're in school, working through CVS, being able to buy one, stretching yourself to do so. But imagine that risk sets you up for larger ones. It looks like it's paid off, and have been able to push yourself into larger and larger goals around that. I know you're a bank owner as well, real estate. I'm glad we already touched into. We're gonna have more questions for you
Yeah.
around that down the line. But imagine the pharmacy plays into some of your real estate holdings, and then it
Sure.
sounds like everything you've learned through your path across each of these different verticals has led you into tech and the formation of Drugstore2Door, and being able to now service independent pharmacies accordingly.
Perfect. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Now, just going back to the world of being a dentist, going to become an owner of a pharmacy. What were the biggest challenges around that? Work with a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs. It seems like a world that unless you're in it, you can't even touch it. What were some of the big obstacles there?
No, and I think that's the misconception. For me, what I saw, so when I was thinking about going down the road of dentistry, I'm actually a fairly artistic dude. So I thought I'm going to go down cosmetic dentistry. This is a great lane. And
Yep.
I shadowed someone, a family friend who was not a cosmetic dentist, but another specialist in the field. And this was the guy who was like whistling to work every day. Like this dude he loved what he was doing. But one thing dawned on me when I was comparing him, and shortly after the guy I met in pharmacy, is the guy I met in pharmacy. He was out on the golf course. He was driving exotic cars. He wasn't tied to an establishment. The dentist was tied to his establishment. If his two hands weren't cranking, he wasn't generating income. Did he generate great income? Yes. But if he wasn't bent over somebody's mouth, like he wasn't generating that income. And that was that aha moment, and why I really was like, man, if I can go stay in the healthcare space and go to pharmacy, but I can actually amplify what I'm doing, put other people in my place, not be limited by my two hands, and generate some real scale and revenue so that I can create models and build, I'd be smoking crack not to go this way versus that way, right? And you could
Yep.
probably amplify it in dentistry, but I thought about my road as a cosmetic dentist. There's an art to what you do. So you can't just plug people in to be as good. It's your skill set that gets you there. And I don't think there's a wrong path, but for me, that entrepreneurial like burning was way higher than the fulfillment of, being the guy, in the thing, doing the thing, it outweighed it tremendously. And so once I
Yes.
got in, it was really like my big hurdles were you get in, you learn everything, you do it yourself, you're the best at all the things you do, nobody can do it as good as you. And then it's figuring out how do you start to unravel that stuff and start hiring people so that they can take things away from you, give up control of things in that process so that you can continue to rinse and repeat your model over time. And that's the hard part because you'll see things and go, ugh, but you got to let them learn, right? And you might take a financial hit by letting them learn, but it's the only way to get to, for me, to get to that multiplication factor to really start to scale.
Absolutely. It's such a value to be able to work on the business versus in the business. I learned that early in my career. Actually, could quote a book, The E Myth, The Entrepreneur
Yeah,
Myth, saying how
love that.
many people are really self employed versus entrepreneurs. So, almost like you were talking about in dentistry, where you were able to find a model that was far more scalable because your patients, your customers weren't coming in just to see AJ. They were coming in to get their medication. As long as your team was able to do their job effectively, you could be, just to play off your analogy, on the golf course while running a scaling business.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, all teams, all process, everything. The more you learn it, it's hard in the beginning too, right? 'Cause you don't necessarily have the funds to put the right people. There are points in my career where I'm like, man, if I could hire this person and this person and this person, it's like, well, I don't have the budget to hire the people that I want to plug in these. So how do I start to leverage talent I have, or how do I start to work in a different way to start to build that team so then I can free myself up to go to that next particular level. And that's where just creativity comes into play. So different types of equity deals, earnout deals, just a bunch of cool things you can really start to do to help yourself. So I've never been held back by the money component. Like I figured it out until we got to a certain place. And then once you get to a certain place, getting the money gets fairly easy.
Mhm.
And then from there, you got to be careful and diligent with the money. But man, you can accomplish it at any level.
Sure. Once you were more established, once you had a model that was working, it was just a matter of scaling. So being able to tap into finance, into capital, became much easier.
Yeah.
At this time, you buy your own pharmacy. Are you seeing the real estate benefits? Is that what opens your mind up to real estate investing as a whole, or did that come at a later stage?
It's kind of funny. That's again, I joked about growing up in a household where my dad's from overseas and I had, the three choices. Part of that too is like there's something in our blood is just you got to own real estate. It's like part of the equation. And so my dad had a couple little rental properties, and I'm sure some of it was brainwashing in my early childhood, but I always looked at real estate, especially for me as a retirement option, like one leg of a retirement option. So as soon as I started to generate any kind of income, I started throwing it towards rental properties. And so I started just very basic, like duplexes, duplexes, triplexes, very little single family stuff. I tried to stay at least in the duplex realm and just continue to kind of stack them up until I got to small apartment complex. And, so just continued to stack and picked up some commercial along the way. But I haven't gone crazy heavy into commercial. I'll buy the buildings in the areas where I know, like for instance, I have pharmacies in areas that it's a very affluent area. It's growing, values are continuing to go up. There's opportunity to have more of that location and add other tenants, etc. So if it strategically makes sense, I absolutely do it. I have some in really small towns that I don't care to own the real estate there. I mean, if I don't want to deal with a landlord, I may buy it, but there's not a crazy flip opportunity or an opportunity for crazy amounts of revenue. And so those are different calculated decisions. So yes, pharmacy was attached to it, but I'd say more so from creating the nest egg that allows for the external investment. So
Sure. Sure. How many pharmacies do you have at this point? And is it a similar process that you go through to identify those locations?
So what's funny is when I first started this thing, I thought like I'm going to go to 100 pharmacies, 200 pharmacies, whatever it might be. And I started going, and there's a whole nother story on what it means to grow broke. Like when you actually acquire and scale, acquire and scale. I remember when I got to like pharmacy 4 and then got my tax bill at the end of the year and didn't prepare appropriately. And the accountant's like, hey, I need you to write this check before tomorrow. I'm like, what account am I going to write this check from? Like, there's no funds to write this check, you know? And so literally the epitome, everything looks great on paper until it's time to pay the guy. And then you're like, oh man, I'm in trouble. But so I learned what growing broke meant. But I ended up around 12, 13 locations before I realized that's not the exact path I want to stay on. So I still currently have 9 pharmacy locations myself. I've got a team I've put together, so they're actively back into acquisition mode. And so now that I've built a team that can run all of those operations, can source deals, look at deals, etc., we'll start buying again. I believe there's opportunities out there to do that. But I stopped that model a few years ago whenever I moved all my energy into drugstore to door and decided I would build the team to go back and do that.
Now, what was the light bulb around that? I know you're servicing, independent pharmacies, as you mentioned, but where was the moment where you said, okay, I could keep scaling. I'm feeling this, scale to broke element. Tech is where it's at. Here are the opportunities in the market. Do you recall that moment or that period of time?
Yeah, so I was in my own store. So I had a marketer working for me. I was looking at our web presence. You know, it was what I considered like glorified business cards, if you will, digital business cards. This websites didn't really have a ton of utility, and I was looking at independent collectively plus how we're performing against all other independent pharmacies. And then what did it look like if I visited a CVS.com or a Walgreens.com or a Walmart.com? Like, how big was the gap between where we were and where they are and what we can do and what they can do? Because from a price perspective, a service perspective, all of those things, we can compete and beat it out, all day, every day. The real question came into like, okay, when it comes to what we expect as consumers now, like the ease of everything in our society, have we nailed that? And so I brought an internal marketer on. She was doing all of our stuff, had her work through all of our sites. The end result just kept coming up short, kept coming up short. And so one day I finally got, I was like, you know what? I got $100. I'm going to go the first independent pharmacy I can give $100 to on a Sunday. Keep it. I'm going to call them and I figure out what they did that I'm not doing so I can do it. I spent all afternoon. I couldn't spend my $100. Every independent store that I visited had the same glorified landing page. They even had something from the 90s that, like, just terrible. The presence was absolutely terrible. So I started to look at the market as a whole, the problem as a whole, and just realize, man, if I can go in and build something robust that allows a customer to experience anything and everything they would if they walk through the door of a pharmacy, and I can handle that online, game changer for independent pharmacy. The other plus for us too was the way that we're set up is if you hit the drugstore to door network, you got to realize there are about 20,000 independent pharmacies across the country. So when you look at independent pharmacy collectively, the reach is far greater than any other major player in the space. And so our goal is to connect those dots for a consumer. So while you and I are having this conversation, you could go on, order prescriptions, some of your monthly supplements, and you could even book a COVID shot for Friday at 3 o'clock, and you could do it in one fluid checkout, and we'd push you to the closest independent pharmacy to help you fulfill that. And they could deliver it to your door before this podcast is over. So all of that's there. We wanted to connect all the dots through technology. And so that was we got to go all in. So, and we have, man, look at this. Our vision's huge. Like, we know what the global vision looks like, but we got to serve an immediate need to the business owner, which is, how do I get you more revenue today? Because I want you to believe in our dream, but how do I get you more revenue today? So that's why we had to build it in a way that it has extreme utility right out of the box with, all of the additional things that come with the scale.
Amazing. So you're looking at these poor quality sites, the same landing page, repurposed from the 90s, and said, hey, this needs to evolve. We need to
Yep.
have a better experience for consumers here. We're going to create a platform We're going to go after the 20,000 plus independent pharmacies. And in doing so, we're going to be able to build up a consumer base that can then get serviced from their local pharmacy, immediately and have a better experience for all sides of the table.
Correct. And service their own customer base with the tools you'd expect today, right? I have the expectation if I want a hamburger, I should be able to go to an app, select a hamburger,
Yep,
not change course, anything I'm doing, and have a hamburger brought to my door. So why in the world would that not be the case for my healthcare, right?
100%.
Yeah. So we wanted to make sure the pharmacy could offer those same tools to their current customer base and any customers we bring to the table.
Now, you have a marketplace. How did you launch the platform? How did you grow both sides of the marketplace, the independent pharmacies and the consumers? Did you have marketing that went to both? Did the pharmacies kind of come along with their own audience? How were you able to grow the user base as a whole?
Yeah, so that was the beauty of it is every pharmacy has a loyal customer base. So our goal was let's go after the B2B and let the B2C start to take care of itself. And then
Nice.
over time, we will do more and more appearances like this where we start to drive more of the B2C side of things, and raise more and more awareness. Now that we got coverage in every single state and we got pockets that are getting more and more dense, and all the opportunity where we can service patients through independent pharmacies in our networks, let's get out there. But for us, the beautiful thing about this business is I'm the target demographic. Like I'm the customer. And
Mm.
so that worked out beautifully for us in understanding the pain points in independent pharmacy and ownership, and what we need to do to keep up and stay viable, and all the things that are going on in this industry, which are crazy. That's been the amazing thing is that we've been able to take that, and then I can talk real and my team can talk real to every owner out there, because we live, breathe, eat everything that we sell. Like we are the embodiment of what we sell.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Gave me the supplement example too. But Yeah, I think that's amazing. You could have went a lot of different routes. You even tried to service some of the customers yourself. Instead, you said, no, I'm going one more layer apart. I was in dentistry, went to pharmacy because of the scalability. I'm going to be setting myself up for even more volume by being the platform that pharmacies use with their customers. Over time, we can look at more customers, be able to direct them to the right pharmacy, the right place to get whatever they need. And typically, I imagine a large percentage of the US adult population needs a pharmacy for something. You gave examples for all different types of procedures, all different types of medication, supplements, something.
Yeah.
So I see the long term potential here. Are there other competitors doing what you're doing? How are you better than those guys? How are you primed for growth?
This is what's cool about. So the thing we took on that was incredibly complex is everyone goes and solves linear things, if you will. So there's a lot of opportunities for refill applications where you go punch your refills in, but it's limited in scope to refills. Or there's plenty of scheduling tools out there that are limited to scope and scheduling. There are plenty of web developers out there who are limited to a very pretty website, but has to bolt all these things on for functionality to exist, which means, okay, now you're going to have a hyperlink to this and a hyperlink to that and a hyperlink over here. So for us in this space, it was critical that we came in and built all of the infrastructure internally so that the engine is behind the site. So when we do put that pretty facade on, and all of the things that go into the design and the marketing and all the things that meet the mission of that independent pharmacy, when a customer comes there, we're not pushing them anywhere. Everything is powered in house, so they can put prescriptions in their cart, they can put over the counter items and supplements in their cart, they can book and schedule products and put that in the same cart, and that's one fluid checkout. We don't send you anywhere else. And so there's nobody, especially in the pharmacy space, because there are other hurdles for credit card transactions and the ability to sell prescriptions online, et cetera, that we had
Yes.
to solve as well. And we solved all of those. So from a package perspective for this space, there's nobody who's doing it holistically like we are. Everyone, there are plenty of components of things out there, but nobody's has attacked it holistically.
the idea of the one-stop shop. Instead of having a link to this and a link to that, customers can get everything taken care of in one spot. The books, everything all the way through. I've heard of some of the headache that's involved with credit card processing in the space. So, like you said, you figured it out. You're able to knock it all out, and it sounds like there's far more of far more room to grow
Oh
in the
yeah.
industry,
Oh yeah.
from independent pharmacies also to the customer base and becoming more business to customer from here, business to consumer. It sounds like it's only upwards.
Absolutely. That absolutely. We have been on a tear. We want to continue to grow at the rate we've been growing. We have some amazing partners that have come on, and so yeah, we're loving it. We just now we want to get out and get consumers thinking about the product as well, and then also just like to share the mission, man. It's there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, but it's also a lonely space, and when you really get in it and you start diving in it, like things like these are fantastic and it's hard because you don't everyone wants to go share their wins, and it's like, man, just like every week is like this, if people could just share that experience and know, like, man, okay, if you're onto something and you're testing it right and the market's responding, like, expect headwind. And like, I look at the challenge of getting in as the filter. Like, that's the filter for how many people are going to be on the other side of what you're doing. And so the more filters you can go through, the harder the headwind when you've got the uh, right product and right fit. The those get me excited now. When they used to kind of be discouraging, now it's like, man, this is exciting. Like, it's this. I need to be on the other side of this as quickly as I possibly can.
Yeah. And breakdowns lead to breakthroughs, I find.
Yeah,
You get smarter throughout the process. Maybe it's with the partnership, it strengthens throughout that. So definitely like what you're saying about the headwinds here. And to speak to that further, love to package actionable insights here for other entrepreneurs, other founders. You've obviously been able to figure out a lot for your model and for various projects that you have outside of your core business here. What advice would you have for anyone listening in terms of marketing tests towards their own growth? And marketing is a broad term. You're obviously living it. I'm really speaking to, as I mentioned, overall increase evaluation, overall increase in market share. What are some things that they could test out for their own initiatives?
absolutely. I think the thing we get caught up in, and this is me pointing at myself, and especially early on, is we think we have to build the product to get the feedback to enter the space. And you spend a lot of time and energy building a what you think. And then the market tells you it's not what we think. And it doesn't matter how good you think it is, the market just said you didn't ask, right? And so I would encourage, like, keep it as close to a napkin idea as you can and challenge the napkin. Like, take the napkin out in whatever way it is. I know focus groups are one popular way to do it, but really go test it from people who don't love you. Go out to people who are going to give you real and true and raw feedback and say, hey, if I gave you this, would you do it? If I had this and I said today, you can take this and would you do it? And that's the most rudimentary place I would say to start. And then once the technology is there, everything's been invented some way, shape, or form. It just may not be the appropriate use case. So I always go look for, like, what's out there that's as close to what we're trying to do as possible. And then how can we test it in our environment to say, okay, do we go build something hyper specific now to really make this right? Or we'll build some bootleg thing that I know we're going to be incredibly embarrassed of in about 6 months, but I'll put it out there and get my, skid up just to get the raw feedback. We did that with our scheduling tool. When COVID hit, we went on to WordPress. We built the most basic scheduler you could as fast as we could possibly build it. We went out to independent pharmacy and blast them and said, free scheduler, don't miss your opportunity to give COVID vaccines. Bro, I had close to 1,000 pharmacies sign up in 7 days, and we were imploding, right? We didn't prepare appropriately, like crashing. The HIPAA forms are crashing everything. So the whole team is like 24/7 trying to pull this all back together so it doesn't explode. But we got amazing feedback. We helped give hundreds of thousands of vaccines through the scheduling tool, and came back and built a refined piece that's actually part of the whole. So
And had 1,000 independent pharmacies join your network, which, as a marketer, could see all the benefits from that. That's huge. And yeah, I'm a big fan of testing it. Assumptions are one thing, but you need the data to tell you that it's working. Challenge the napkin, I think, is awesome. And, it really is up to the market. And if you have, like you said, focus groups, some type of closed loop system, but don't just go off of what you think, what your peers think. Go to the ones who don't love you. Go to the actual people who are going to be buying, and over time shape your product accordingly. I've seen companies delay their launch for years,
yeah,
literally, in terms of perfecting their product, their
yeah,
code, whatever it is. In that period of time, they could have been building their audience and had that arena waiting for them. Once the product rolled out, they could have been, beta testing, that they could have been doing many other things.
yeah.
Instead, they were going for perfection. Sometimes done is better than perfect. Like you said, forms were crashing. Meanwhile, you were able to get the meaningful findings from there to be able to shape the product to where it is today.
Yeah, it's hard. None of us want to take our baby out and all the neighbors be like, "Damn, they're ugly." But that's the reality of it. Like that's what you get. And especially in tech, is like you put it out there and then you just take the bruises because you're going to get them. There's no such thing as perfect and there's no such thing as done. So just be prepared to go take some bruises along the way.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about those bruises. Shows called Test, Optimize, Scale. I find optimization to be where real marketing talent lives. Anyone can set something up, but what you do when it's not working, that's what really separates things. You talked about the rolling waves. What is the best approach when something's not working? And I find it rarely does right out of the gate. What
Yeah.
are the best steps to be able to optimize it towards a point of effectiveness?
Yeah, so I think about it like a dial because a lot of people just like change course. You go in, you're like, well, that didn't work. Let's go try this thing. And that didn't work. And let's go try this thing. Where really, like, you think this is the path, but that's actually the path. And it's like three small dial switches to the right changes the whole trajectory of everything. And so early on with our product, we were hopeful that we could build a turnkey e commerce solution for independent pharmacies and that we could just bolt that on to whatever websites that they had, right? That whole hyperlink thing. And the data smacked us in the face. I mean, I could have been putting free Ferraris and, get your second home on that hyperlink of the primary site that was getting absolutely no traffic and nobody would have claimed their free Ferraris, right? So we immediately out of the gate knew we got to get out of this version as quickly as possible and started iterating towards the more complete version as quickly as we possibly could. Then we had to start taking in information from who are the website developers out here? What are they doing? What tools are they offering? What, right? So immediately we just started clicking that dial in the direction of where we were seeing things not happening, right? There's no direct traffic to the site. Why? What happens when you hit the site? So immediately just start tearing everything down and looking at, okay, where are the holes on the path to our success? And so that was our first. We had a lot of people sign up. I mean, what we were after, I could sell the hell out of that vision. So we did sign up, sign up, sign up, sign up, sign up, and then in a couple of months, you got 100 stores on with 0 transactions, and you're going, okay, what's going on here, right? Like, and then go iterate.
There you go. Tearing down the walls. And it's tough to do when you're too attached to that napkin as a whole. So the
Mhm.
fact that you went in there, were able to shape it to a point to where you actually were seeing conversions. What did you do from there though? How are you able to scale? How are you able to say, hey, now these independent pharmacies are seeing success. There's more of them coming on. It's working for their customers. Let's really go hard on B2B. Let's bring on as many as we can so we have a good percentage of market share, the awareness that comes along with it. What was instrumental in terms of your scale?
So there were three things. Because of my pharmacy businesses, I knew I did not want to get into a massive people issue again too quickly, like way too many employees too fast, burn rate going through the ceiling. So we started solving systematic things with technology. Where can we go plug technology in that allows us to rinse and repeat at a scale that speeds us up, whether that's onboarding of sites, that's intake of documentation, that's whatever that could possibly be. So we shored all that up. I mean, we went from being able to develop a site over months to down to days, down to a day, like crazy changes or shrink in time period. Two was getting the right key people in place so that they could kind of own their departments. So as we went out there to scale, they could handle and project manage the environment that they were in. So again, this is just like in my pharmacy business, building that team out under you, because I'm the lead sales guy in the company. Like I'm the guy. I'm the creator, the understander, the one who's understander, the one who's lives and breathes this thing. And so I needed to be sure I could be out there and be the face. And then the last was like exactly what you said. How do we reach greater audiences? And let's get on stage and speak, right? So I started booking speaking gigs at independent pharmacy conferences, plus setting up booths at these conferences, doing continuing education for other conferences that have a large number of pharmacy owners that would show up. And it's instrumental because now you're up, you're the expert. And at the end of that conference, you're closing 50, 100, 200 locations. So it really starts to change everything. But you can't put one in front of the other, right? I could have gone and sold that many. And if we didn't have the tech infrastructure and the right people for the scale, we would have imploded. And so all of those things had to come in at the same time or very closely together to deal with the cascade.
Very smart. Very smart. So tech infrastructure, so you could have less people, then having the right people, and including yourself, but the right people who are in there, the right team. And it sounds like you've
Correct.
built a very strong team to be able to do this for you. And then taking it to the right stages for you,
Correct.
physical stages, going to these conferences, being able to do these pitches, being able to have the right flow afterwards, but enough volume of them, not just a one-time deal or when they come out, being intentional about having that type of listening, that type of awareness from your target market by putting yourself out there.
100%. And that was the hard
Yeah.
part for me too. The way I was brought up was like, don't show all your, like, stay private, keep your stuff. Like, the less people know, the better. And we're in a completely weird place now. Like, as I've
Yeah.
started to podcast and get on stages and open my social media up, I'm like, man, I feel naked out here. Like, this is a weird place to be. It's just, you feel incredibly vulnerable, but it's the only way that you can build reputation out there. I mean,
Yes.
you have to start to show like, hey, I'm a credible person. I'm real. I exist. Like I bruise the same way you bruise. I laugh the same way you laugh. I cry the same way you do. And we do hard stuff over here, and we're trying to do it well, right? And just make sure that that's known.
It is a funny time in this digital era, but these are powerful tools that we use, to be able to showcase the leader of an organization, how they think, how they act, how they've created the product, and with the customer, with any partners in mind, to create a more effective model for the entire ecosystem. It really goes a long way, and what we would have to do one person at a time through conversations decades back, we're now able to get out to thousands of our prospects, millions of consumers rapidly.
Mm.
So likewise, I not even particularly active as an individual on social media, but have the podcast, have panels all the time, always trying to share insights from what we're seeing from our campaigns, so
Yeah,
that there can be a higher success rate in the industries that we touch. But yes, you're obviously very good at it. The platform, what you're getting out around it. I'm expecting only to hear more success stories from here.
I appreciate it. I'll take the expectation too. I need all the drive I can get. So,
There you go. Well, really enjoying the conversation. As we begin to round stuff out here, any additional thoughts, any final notes you want to leave for listeners? And if anybody is tuning in that wants to get in touch with you, whether they're in your industry, whether they're on the investor side, or just a founder looking for tips, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you?
okay, I'll start with that one because that's probably the most simple. It's my name, AJ, the initials AJ Asgary, .com for my personal site, which will kind of branch you into all the different things I'd like to do. Or Insta or LinkedIn or any of those. You can find me on all of them. Just look AJ as Gary, and that will take you there, link you out to companies I have, etc. So very, very easy to find just through my name. The thing I would leave behind is, to me, I think about all of the people I've been around as I've been on different entrepreneurial journeys, and all the people who want to be on the same journey, but who don't necessarily take the step to be on that journey. Uh, there's something in, I don't know if it's fear or the thought of the sacrifice or the fear of the success or the failure or what people think. The thing I would say is that life is short. Like, my dad died of ALS in his 69 years old. This was a guy who worked very hard his whole life to hit a retirement age to then do whatever he wanted to do with his life. And not that he didn't have a good life in between, but he had a lot of plans for from 69 to 90 years old, or whatever was in his head of where he thought he would go. And man, this thing's a journey from now to whatever that endpoint is. And this is as golden as it gets, brother. Like, we're in our most golden years, unless some crazy technology hits in our time frame, which is possible, that changes the evolutionary clock for us. So for me, it's like, you don't want to be, or I don't want to be in a place where I'm regretting decisions I could have made or things I could have tried that I didn't do because I was fearful in this small period of time, where at the end of the day, all of the people you think don't, like, they don't care about you that much. They just need something to talk about. And then the people who really love you are going to love you no matter whether you succeed or you fail. If you try 15 times or you get it your first time. So the thing I just put out there is just like, make this ride fun, whether it's a side hustle to get to the full hustle, or going after the full hustle, knowing, like, most people's primary job today, that's a fantastic fallback plan for you, man. Like, go try something and then fall back to that career. You're obviously talented enough. You've got the skill set. Somebody hired you once. There's a high probability they will hire you again. So go out there and do some stuff, and then make today's best case scenario your worst case scenario fallback plan, and just go try, So that's where I would leave it is, have some fun, man. Take some risks and set your downside to where you're not under a bridge and homeless and scraping for food. But we tend to overthink what the bottom looks like. And it's like, I'd go back to the job I have right now. That's the bottom, and that's like, that kind of sucks to think about, So that's where I would leave it. I don't know how great that is for listeners, but
I love that. That I echo across the board. I love the way you put it too. Of today's, your job today is likely your fallback plan, and you could be building on top of that. The golden age is now. Have fun with it. Time is short. All the right messages applying towards business, your personal life. The most successful people, it's hard to determine where one stops and the other begins. They're just going after their vision of perfection, right? And
yeah.
I hear it in our conversations with you here. So, AJ, I can't thank you enough for coming on to the podcast. I've been taking thorough notes. Going to share this with my team, the audience, and definitely recommend listeners to get in touch with AJ. I think it's a very warm invitation. Want to thank you for making the time.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. See you next time.